Hey guys, subscribe for daily content. And if you're shopping for gear, make sure you check out the description for the newest items at some of the very best online retailers. There's also links for some of the items that I personally recommend. Thanks! What's going on YouTube? Metal Complex here, and today I've got another interesting knife review / knife overview to share with you guys. This is the Vehement Knives.
Vehement
Mongrel. So let me start off by saying, when I unboxed this, I messed up the pronunciation of vehement, and a lot of people pointed it out. A few of you were right, but it turns out that the the vast majority of the people informing me on the pronunciation of vehement also didn't know how to pronounce it. You can go back and check out the unboxing. It's actually pretty funny. I know everybody was just joking around, but apparently this is just maybe I'm just making myself feel better about not actually knowing how to pronounce it. But now I do, so we're good. Anyways, thank you so much to Nick for sending this in for review. This is definitely one that I had my eyes on, considering it is a new, at least new to me, American company. Actually, I'll show you guys the card here. Matt Martin here, and there's the website, email, Facebook group, phone number, all of that stuff. But yeah, a new American knife. Not an inexpensive knife, but an extremely well-made knife, and I've got a lot of things to say about it. So thanks to Nick for letting me check this out. Yes, this will go back to Nick after I'm done with it. I don't get to keep it. Thanks to my generous patrons for supporting me right now. There's a link for Patreon right down below, and please make sure to follow me on Instagram at metal_complex. Let's go ahead and get a measurement of this guy. And by the way, I will link Vehement Knives down in the description so that you can check to see when these are going to be available. Depends on when you're watching the video. They might be available now, they might not. You can just check. There's other things that they make too. We're going to cover this guy today. Overall length of the Mongrel coming in at just shy of 8 inches. It's like 7.9. In fact, I think the official measurement is 7.94. Blade length just shy of 3.5 inches, which I believe I watched a video where Matt talked about keeping that definitely legal to conceal in most areas of the United States. Obviously, depending on where you live, that's going to be different. But so that'll be beneficial for a lot of people. And then your cutting edge length is exactly, my measurement is 3.25. Let's go ahead and get some size comparisons up against the Ontario Rat Model 1 and the its little brother, the Ontario Rat Model 2. So you can see here, this is definitely, this is what I call a full-size knife. Definitely. It's shorter than the Rat 2, bigger than the Rat 1. Definitely has more presence, though. This is a solid knife. How about up against the Spyderco PM2 and the Spyderco Para 3? Once again, it's close to the PM2, not quite the same overall length. Definitely longer than the Spyderco Para 3. And why am I taking time folding these up? Let's go ahead and do the last couple, the Benchmade Griptilian, or in this case, the Ritter Hogue, and the Benchmade Bug Out. So you can see here, it's got more of a, it's not, I don't want to call it a slender body. It's just not quite as tall as some of the areas in the Rat, the Ritter Hogue. But it still has that robust feeling, right? So, and we'll talk about dimensions here in a sec. Very close to the size of the Ritter Hogue, definitely longer than the Benchmade Bug Out. Similar cutting edge to the Bug Out, a slightly shorter cutting edge than the Ritter Hogue. Good measurements there, at least in my book. Let's go ahead and do carry profile. So thickness up against the Spyderco Para 3. You can see here this is not a massively thick knife. A lot of you guys know that these are being built by Medford. And whenever we hear Medford, we think huge, monstrous. We think of stuff like this, right? Which is a knife that we're going to use as an example here in just a second. But the 3/4 AR, that's a Strider knife that's also being manufactured by Medford. We don't have that. We actually have a knife that's, you know, reasonably thin and carryable. So that's pretty cool. Length and height up against the PM2 and Para 3 Star is looking for the PM2. You can see here that even including this pretty pointy flipper tab, it still is not quite, yeah, maybe it's almost right there. I think it depends on which knife is on top. Yeah, the Para 3 and PM2 are still a little bit taller. We're going to talk about that flipper tab, but nothing too cumbersome. It's like I always say, if you carry just a knife in your knife pocket, then who cares? If you carry a bunch of, you know, if you carry like your keys and you carry, you know, I don't know, your tools and piano keys and a boat anchor, right, and your Tamagotchi, well then yeah, you're gonna have it hooking onto stuff, right? But if you're like me and you only carry a knife in your knife pocket, then not really that big of a deal. Let's go ahead and do a hardware check on this guy. I'll get out my tools. As per usual, my tools are very inexpensive, very recommendable. You can find them right down in the description in the section that talks about my tools. Now the pivot is, I believe, a T8, which is good. That's what I like to see. Both sides T8. Then we have some T8 pocket clip screws, which is also, ooh, are they a little bit bigger? Hang on. It's not rare that I have to get out a T9, but I think I'm going to check it just in case. That would be... it's not wanting to fit perfectly. Those appear to be T8. It's weird, though. It's almost like it wants to bite initially. Use a T8 on those. The other screws are screws that I believe I've seen on Medford knives. These are sort of flush with the top, and they appear to be hex. These should all be, I think they should all be Torx. Like, will this be hard to undo, right, if you have to use a hex? No, it's fine, but I think Torx are better, and obviously Medford is no stranger to using large Torx fasteners. It would just be nice to be able to use the same head to disassemble the entire thing, but no big deal. This should be a very easy knife to disassemble, minimal hardware, nothing too crazy going on here, so yeah, pretty darn good. Let's go ahead and get a measurement of blade stock thickness here. So the thickness on this guy is also something that's surprising considering it's made by Medford, but designed by somebody who obviously had a specific goal in mind. It's saying 121 thousandths. I believe I heard Matt say it was 125 thousandths, which is great. That's the same thickness that you're going to get on knives that are like the Ritter Hogue, which is thick enough to be robust, but it's also thin enough that when it comes down to the edge, it's plenty thin. And we're going to talk about that as well. We have titanium, and it is solid titanium. It's not milled out on the inside. The end result there is because the blade is light and thin, right? The balance is back here behind the primary choil. It's about right here. Not bad. I mean, the entire knife isn't necessarily a monstrously heavy thing. So I don't know how much I really care that the balance is a bit off. We're looking at 4.37 ounces, which I would bet money most of you guessed that this was 5 ounces or more, right? At least that would have been my guess. So maybe I'm speaking for you guys, but no, 4.37 ounces, not perfect ratios, especially if you subscribe to the whole ounce and inch thing, but okay. That's fine. For me, yeah, that's no problem. This is pretty darn close to what I prefer to carry anyway, so I don't have a problem with that at all. What did we not check here? I think we pretty much checked everything. Let's go ahead and move on. So, I'll tell you guys right now, this is a fully American-made knife, which is something that I think is great. Somebody, you know, as somebody who lives in the United States, I am instantly. Now, I will review all knives fairly, but everybody has their own personal bias. I will instantly put my own personal magnifying glass out of American-made, like fully, truly American-made knives, especially when they are new or new to me designers. So I think that's great. With that comes a higher price tag. We are not talking about an American Kershaw, an American ZT, an American ProTech, right? There's a little bit extra that goes into stuff like this. There's more, you know, not necessarily like, you know, everything being shaped and created by hand. No, there's still a machine process, but there's a lot more hand tuning, and I'm going to guess that these are probably in line with the way that Medford and Hinderer and some of the other knife makers that are of the same caliber, the way that they do things, which is there's a lot more human energy and attention that goes into this stuff. And despite the fact that we are looking at materials that you can find at a lower price point, the time it takes to put these materials together and ultimately shape this thing take longer, and time equals money. They have to put money into the time that it takes to create this stuff. So I can understand why these things come in higher. We'll talk about price a little bit more later. So the idea here was to apparently, and it makes perfect sense, to have something that is extremely familiar, even though you may have never seen it. This has a very straightforward knife, but straightforward American knife profile. A lot of people said that it kind of looks like a buck. Kind of, yeah, absolutely. But it is extremely familiar, and with those familiar lines come familiar ergonomics. You have, in my case, pretty much one area that you're going to be locked into, but this area back here is not so aggressive that it's like you have to be. You can kind of move around a little bit, just a little bit. I'm comfortable in here, and all of these areas are really nicely knocked down. So I don't have a problem with any of this. I also like the titanium. By the way, these came in a bunch of different, I say came, check the link. It might, depending on when you're watching this, there might be more available. I'm sure that they're planning to make more because these sold out really fast the first time that they hit the market. They had different combinations of bronze and blue and satin. I like how they do this faux bolster thing. They all don't look exactly like this. I like how this looks. And some people are going to like this plain, smooth titanium. This is all done really, really well. I think that there's a golden opportunity here to add further contrast by texturing one of these areas. Obviously, for grip, I think that this area, it would be cool if there were some of these that had some diagonal lines, or maybe just like a diamond pattern or something. I always bring that up. I love the diamond textured titanium. This area in here underneath this, it's not a real bolster. It's just an area that's carved out. Texturing right here would create just, a little bit more traction, but they could also texture this area up here just to make it look interesting, right? That's, to me, when I look at stuff like this, I like to see more shaping and more texturing in titanium because it makes me feel like, ooh, yeah, it helps, the contrast between certain areas, or it makes certain areas of the knife pop, or just make it look a little bit higher quality. This knife does have the appearance of a high quality knife, and it is a high quality knife. Me personally, I like to see stuff like that. Some people, that's more of an aesthetic preference, but on top of that, when they do that, it does cost more money. Maybe not a whole lot, but it does cost more money. So that might mess with their pricing a little bit. I think I would pay a little bit more money to have some texturing or some different patterns or something on there. But that's just me. Plenty of access to the lock here. This is nicely cut out and just very, very friendly to the finger. This area right here is just fine. No double clutch or anything like that. The part that's gonna bother some people is this really pointy flipper tab. The detent on this guy is good. You can see here the action. We are running on bearings, and it just takes a little bit of motivation. Not much, it's perfectly acceptable, and it's very smooth and very consistent on the inside. That flipper tab is just a little bit too pokey. Considering how this area is shaped right here, they almost could shave that flipper tab down to match this area exactly and have it completely hidden. And I honestly think it would still be big enough that you could get a hold of it, and rounded enough, right? It just would make it less pointy, and you should still be able to access it. But then again, there's no way for me to say that without actually experiencing it. One thing I can say for sure, this is a little bit too pointy, and unless you are really dedicated to light switching it every single time, and I mean subconsciously dedicated, I have a tendency to want to push button things, so that digs into my finger a little bit. It does act as a good guard, I'll give it that. The blade, classic clip point blade with a fuller. Sorry, I'm wiping my fingerprints off here because nobody wants to see that. Satin finish looks good. It definitely looks like something that Medford did, and I mean that as a compliment. It looks great, right? The one area that I don't like is that little smile back there. You can see that. It's kind of ground up. This is honestly what I think here. I think the blade looks a little bit skinny in relationship to the handle. It would be nice if this blade were taller. That would, bring it down. Not that everybody in the whole world wants this, but it would bring it down to an even thinner edge. Now, the problem is that maybe in the closed position, the blade, if it were taller, it would be running into things like this. And sometimes, in some situations, this can be remedied by the barrel spacers being carved out or being made deeper in some areas so that the blade doesn't contact them. That's assuming, of course, that the blade stays centered and doesn't rub on one side or the other. But I think it would be cool to see the blade come down just a little bit further and just give it some more height and have it matte. That's just me. That's just me judging the aesthetics. This is a aesthetic critique, and beauty is in the eye of the beholder, right? Functionally, again, it would give the grind a little bit more room to drop down towards the edge and make it even thinner. And it doesn't really have a problem with thinness to begin with, truthfully. There is a pretty massive flat that's splitting the blade, like, you know, in terms of height by 50%. So it doesn't have an enormous amount of room to drop towards the cutting edge, but we're starting with a pretty thin stock. So it does get impressively thin down at the edge. And you can see here the taper. It's still got some meaningful robustness, right? But it's definitely thin down here, and the tip is definitely pointy. What's the blade steel? The blade steel on this guy is CPM 3V, which is an awesome steel. Very, very tough, good edge retention, very easy, at least in terms of like comparing it to other super steels, very easy to sharpen. Not stainless at all. Still a great steel for a pocket knife, especially one that you're gonna beat on. But if you live in an area where stainlessness is of the utmost importance, 3V will probably not be your friend unless you want to constantly baby it, which some people don't have a problem with, just constantly cleaning it off and adding some protective oil or something all the time. That might be what you're dealing with. I think it would be a good idea to have, you know, options for, you know, a stainless and a non-stainless, S45VN and CPM 3V. I think, you know, a lot of people would go for that. But as far as how the blade's done in this form, everything looks great except for that little smile back at the end. The edge feels good. Everything feels good. I noticed that the detent ball path was exposed. And initially I was like, I don't like that, because any debris that gets on that or any gunk while you're using it is going to mess with that detent ball gliding smoothly over that path, perhaps, right? You might grind some dirt up in there. On the flip side, though, I did have somebody point out that because it is exposed, it's easier to clean out, at least in that area. If you have it, you know, closed all the way into the knife, inevitably at some point debris is going to get in there anyway, and it makes it that much harder. We've all taken a little piece of paper and wedged it in there and tried to get the gunk out, right? Inevitably, you're going to get stuff in there anyway, and you might be able to blow it out. You might be able to get a piece of paper, something flat in there and clean it out. You might have to take the knife apart and clean it. I don't know. If something were to impact the blade on that detent ball path, then you're screwed. That's the thing. When it's hidden by the scale, that is extremely unlikely to happen. Then again, how likely is it that something hard enough to make an indentation on the blade is going to impact the blade right there? I don't think very likely. So, I don't know. Yeah, pros and cons. I'm not that bent out of shape about it. It is what it is. Not that big of a deal. Let's see. Not much else I can say about the blade other than I do appreciate these little chamfered edges up here. In fact, all the way down, this is all nicely knocked down. The blade looks really, really good. Very easy to engage and disengage, and I love the garage stops, right? We do have external stops, but they sink into the frame and contact either side of the frame underneath, so you don't see them when the blade is locked out. And that's something I always think is really cool. I just do. It's not like, oh, you know, knives that don't have garage stops aren't good, and knives that do have garage stops are good. No, I just appreciate it when I see it. Fit and finish is excellent. Seating of the hardware, all the machining on everything is just perfect. And at this point, with Medford knives, I don't expect anything less. I have handled a ton of knives that have been made by Medford, whether they were designed by somebody else or not. And, you know, speaking just on the quality of the knives, it has only gotten better. If you've never handled one, now in 2021... they're good. And this is coming from somebody who, my first Medford was back in 2014 or 2015. It was okay, but oh my gosh, they are a lot better now. They are really, really good. I like how the barrel spacers look. The position of lanyard holes is interesting. It's usually back here. And then the pocket clip is over here, but it's up front. And honestly, I don't really care about lanyard holes at all, but at least the pocket clip is... it's not necessarily being overshadowed by the lanyard hole. It's there, and the pocket clip is mounted right beside it. The carry depth is going to be about right here, so there's a decent amount of the knife sticking up out of your pocket, but I would still call this medium depth, so it doesn't bother me. Anywhere between medium and deep carry is fine with me. What I don't like is shallow carry, so if we had it like this, that would be a huge bummer for me. The pocket clip is super basic, and there's not much going on here. I wish that it was something a little bit different. Then again, I don't want to eat my words because I never make comments about the Hinderer pocket clip, and it is arguably just as basic. Something that I like about the Hinderer clip over this guy is that it's actually the space for the pocket clip to be mounted is recessed into the titanium. I'd like to see that. This is mounted right on top. If these loosen up a little tiny bit, it's gonna wiggle, right? If it were recessed, that wouldn't be the case. Then again, the beginning of a wiggle is your indication that it needs to be tightened. So on the Hinderer, you wouldn't have any indication until the thing came loose. I still think that I would like to see the pocket clip recessed. And here's the thing. The pocket clip is completely and totally functional. Straight, and then there's a rise right here. And it's not a aggressive rise, and it's nicely rounded off here. So really you don't feel it too much, right? It just kind of, the whole knife has this very specific personality. And you flip it over and it's like, also, there's a pocket clip. You know, that's what it looks like to me. I think I'd be okay with the pocket clip. I'd still prefer it with something more interesting. It does function. I can't critique it that much. I would just prefer that it were recessed into the titanium. In and out of the pocket, no problem. One-handed, just fine. Here's another aesthetic thing. This does not have the relief cut on the outside. The relief cut is on the inside. I've seen that done with some Medford knives. You know, we have like I got these other two out here, the Hinderer XM24 and also the Strider 3/4 AR. This one also being built by Medford and also having a super basic clip, if I'm being honest. This has the relief cut on the outside. The relief cut is, of course, for anybody who doesn't know, the cut in the titanium that they make that allows the lock bar to be manipulated with one hand easily. If it were the full thickness all the way down, the spring tension would be insane, and there'd be no way. I mean, not unless you were like superhuman, right? Maybe not, I don't know, but it would be a lot harder to disengage, right? I kind of like it when the relief cut is on the outside. It makes this there's two things making the outside of the non-show side of this knife look really underwhelming. There's no relief cut, so there's not a lot of breakup. And then also, and this is an aesthetic thing and a functional thing, there is no over travel stop at all. There's no lock bar insert doubling. It doesn't need a lock bar insert, not like carbidized titanium lock face or anything like that. It doesn't need that, but I do appreciate the over travel stop because it's not likely. But I don't like the idea of, in a rare circumstance, actually bending this thing so far out that it changes the spring tension and then ultimately causes the knife to not lock up correctly. Not a likely circumstance, right? Everybody who's ever owned a Sebenza will be like, dude, that doesn't happen, right? But the whole purpose behind it, right? Rick Hinderer designed that thing. He, in a crazy circumstance, actually did bend out his lock bar and it wouldn't lock. So he created the lock bar stabilizer disc, which keeps it from over traveling this way, but also stabilizes it in this direction. Not that anybody would be strong enough to do that, but I would like that there. And there'd be a little bit of a breakup on this side. I think the combination of adding an LBS disc, it's like a standard size like this. Like these LBS discs, as far as I know, are the same size and they're interchangeable. Give people an option to add a little bit of character flair to it if they wanted to, but it would break this up a little bit. The combination of that and the relief cut being, I think the lock side would look a little bit better. But I got to be fair here. Stop talking about what I think would be more aesthetically pleasing for me and talk about whether or not it actually functions this way. Yeah. It functions just fine. In fact, the lockup, you can see right here, it's pretty early. Oh, it's amazingly early, in fact. Hang on. Oh, man, that is early. Can we get in there and see where it's actually content? Look at that, very early. I think it actually needs to be locking up a little deeper, but it is completely it's absolutely rock solid. That's going to wear in a little bit as you flip it, right? Benefit to a lock bar insert is that steel on steel contact will create less wear over time. A titanium on steel contact, I'm assuming that this is carbidized or hardened a little bit, will wear a little bit faster, but not fast enough that you're going to ruin the knife in any, short amount of time. It's going to take it'll take decades to wear that thing over, right? Geometry is good. No lock stick whatsoever. No blade play, up, down, left, or right. We have no pivot lash whatsoever. And we have a perfectly solid detent with no detent lash. This is solid. This is the type of stuff that, you know, when I handle a Medford knife, they're all like this. They're absolutely solid. Say what you will about the aesthetic and how some of these Medford designs and Medford builds look, right? But they're solid. This is a dependable frame lock, absolutely. Centering on this guy, I think I checked it a while back. Yeah, the centering is perfect on it. It's great. This is a cool knife. What do these come in at? They're going to come in at 500 bucks. Oh my God, wait a second. Hindera knives, also in the same caliber. We're looking at G10 with a steel liner and a titanium lock side with similar steels, coming in at $425. If you want a full titanium Hindera, guess what you're going to pay? $625. That's assuming you can actually get a titanium scale, which you have to install yourself. Chris Reeve knives, full titanium, also using similar caliber materials, $450. We're not too far off of that. Like I said, some things that are going to make it feel, it's not bad the way that it is. In fact, functionally, this is a great knife. If you buy this, you're going to be happy with it. Like if you're just like, I don't care, man, just tell me, is it made well? The quality, the solidity, the fortification, is it all there? Yeah. This is a dependable cutting tool that is made well, and we can rest assured that these blades are being heat treated correctly because, as far as I know, Medford has never had a problem heat treating any of the steels that they use. Functionally, this is great. Again, things that are going to make me much more... I would be much more motivated to buy this if the blade were a little bit taller to match. You know, it's like the body's tall and the blade's a little bit more slender. A little taller. This smile back here, I want to get rid of that. The flipper tab, if it were knocked down a bit, maybe less prolific, the right word? Less of a spire, right? Be cool. Some texturing over here, maybe a recessed pocket clip, and the addition of a some sort of LBS disc or something to keep the frame lock from over traveling, even in the rarest of circumstances. In that case, I would be all over this. As it sits right now, are the people who go after this going to be happy with it? Yes. Is it something that I'm going to tell you guys all to rush out and buy right now? It's close. It's one of those knives that's not recommendable to everybody. I can say that about any knife that I review on this channel. It's not going to be for everybody, but the people who pick it up will be happy with it. I hope to see this evolve a little bit, and I understand when I say that, I'm basically saying, I want this knife to be made the way that I want it to be made, which is selfish and stupid. But I'm also reviewing, I gotta be honest, I'm just gonna point out the stuff that I would like to see. This is cool, and it's awesome to see a new, again, new to me. I don't know how long he's been around. Sorry, that might sound disrespectful. I'd probably just need to keep my eyes and ears open a little bit better. A new American knife designer using an OEM like Medford to bring something that is truly American and high quality to the table. This is cool. I want to see this. I think, the size is pretty good. It wouldn't shock me if he made a smaller one, but it would also be really cool if he made a bigger one, like a 9-inch, if we did something that was like 9 inches long, that would be killer too. I think that this knife is going to continue to do well, no matter what people like me say is, no, I need this changed or this little, people like me nitpicking it, right? This thing is going to do well either way. But I would like to see some of those things. I think this is pretty darn good, the way that it sits. B+, A-. Exciting new American knife. So yeah, take the parts of this review that apply to you and make that decision for yourself, assuming that these become available, when these become available again. I'm sure that they will. Use the parts of my review that apply to you, and if anything that I said doesn't make sense to you or you don't care about, then you can ignore it, right? Same as always. But in any case, this is really cool. I think that's going to be pretty much it today. Thanks again to Nick for sending this in. I really appreciate that. I'll get this guy back to you here shortly. Please make sure to follow me on Instagram at metal_complex. If you enjoyed this video, leave a like. If you'd like to check out my other content, I do, of course, have lots of videos of knives that are either expensive or inexpensive that I do or don't like, so check those out. And if you enjoy all my content, go ahead and click on that Metal Complex logo right there and subscribe because there's definitely more coming. Thanks again for watching, everybody, and have a great day.